What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Expected Bets 4. After a long off season, the NHL is right around the corner, starting back up in October. We're going to do a team preview for each of the 32 teams this year, and we're going to start in the Atlantic Division. But before we get into our first team, let's bring in the rest of the crew. Betsky, how are we doing out there in Arizona?
It's so stinking hot still. It sucks. Just had to go
It's hockey
refill.
weather, right?
Yeah, it's true
Yeah.
hockey weather out
Yeah,
here. It's like
104.
109,
Oh, yeah, exactly.
like 97 when you wake up.
Yeah, I'm sure you want to be at a rink, honestly, at this point to just cool off a
Yes.
little bit. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Franco, how we doing out there in Philly?
I'm excited, man. After starting to go through these breakdowns of these teams, it's like, wow, there's a lot of shifts, a lot of changes, and I'm excited. It hasn't seemed real until this last week or so. Now that we're getting into this, it's like, oh, we're not far now.
No,
Mhm.
almost a month away. The first game takes place October 4th in Prague. The Devils and the Sabres. At least one of those teams should be exciting this year. We'll see about the other one, which we'll get to in a little bit. But before we do that, let's get into our first team preview, the Boston Bruins. Made it to the second round only to meet the same team that they lost to the year before, the Florida Panthers, who would eventually go on to win the Stanley Cup. We talked about the Bruins last year as a lot of question marks heading into the season in regards to kind of their center depth, their kind of overall depth as well, and then kind of their defensive core in addition to that. Again, they make a lot of changes this offseason here. I'll start with you here, Betsky. There's a few kind of big ones. Obviously, Lindholm comes in and provides some much needed center support, and Zadorov on defense as well to pair up with McAvoy, overpaid for him a little bit. But in terms of kind of overall additions this team has made, what are your thoughts on it? Is it kind of a positive, a negative, or how do you reevaluate this roster heading into the season?
You know what's crazy is going into the season last year, I actually was way more down on Boston than I am this year. That
Yep.
Lindholm piece I think was sneaky good for him. I don't think he played to his best ability in Vancouver. I think there was just issues of figuring out where he fit in that roster. He's like the perfect ideal two-way center for Boston, though, who has a little playmaking ability, has a nice shot. I think you look at the lines and it just really smooths out into that depth, especially in the top six, where last season, Morgan Geeky is top six center for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And
And
the Zadorov piece, I think is just a perfect addition too. I mean, big, mean, bruising defenseman on the Boston Bees. I mean, that's a match made in heaven, right?
yeah, and he's kind of the first big defenseman that McAvoy's going to play with since Chara left. And I mean, those two, despite McAvoy kind of being a rookie, they had incredible chemistry and really kind of zigged and zagged off each other. In terms of Lindholm, too, almost, I'm not going to say Patrice Bergeron, but kind of a similar style of play almost
Yeah.
with the defensive aspect that I think the Bruins were desperately needing. And there's going to be a few kind of player props we talk about heading down the line here that I think are going to be extremely interesting for this team. But they also add Lettieri, Max Jones, and then obviously I think their biggest one or addition is going to be Korpisalo. We can talk about the departures in a second, but in terms of a backup goaltender, I don't think he's near the bottom of the barrel in the league by any means. He was with Columbus for a while, bounced around, but I think he's going to be able to give them at least kind of 15 games, if not more, which I think is a huge, I'd say, kind of bonus when you're looking at a backup goaltender, because we can go down the list in the Atlantic Division. Some of those goaltenders are not going to get you 15, 20 in this season here. So, Franco, a lot of departures here for Boston. Allmark kind of headlines that two-headed dragon that they had for a while in Boston. Obviously, in the playoffs, Swayman kind of commanded that number one goaltender role. And the writing was almost on the wall at that point, too, of Boston's not going to bring him back. DeBrusk leaves, Grzelcyk leaves, Heinen leaves. It's a pretty damn long list, if I do say so myself, in terms of a shakeup that the Boston has. Their prospect pool was decent. We had talked about that. But in terms of kind of being in a top 10 position of prospects, they weren't there, but they had a few that cycled through the roster last year that seemed to just fit in place as the Boston magic continues to kind of happen. So what are your thoughts on the overall departures?
Yeah, it's a lot of pieces that are gone. So it's a lot of turnover in general. And I think kind of like what Betsky said, we were a little bit down on Boston going into the season last year because you look at their center depth, this especially kind of is where I go to. Yeah, Lindholm comes in and shores up that top line, but still down the middle, they look a little scary. And now you lose DeBrusque on the wing, who I know he had some ups and downs, but he kind of like came into his own last year towards the end of the season and really caught fire for them. So you're losing him, who's a goal scorer. Now your winger, your top line looks good, but again, you still have Geeky on the wing with Marchand on that second line. And it's like, okay, like he's okay, but I'm not that excited about it. JVR was relatively productive for them, even though he's on the downturn of his career. He's still a big body in front of the net, provides a good power play type of presence for them. And then it's just a lot of other pieces that kind of worked out for them. I mean, Heinen was productive. It's not a name that excites anybody when you see him on paper, but he was productive. Is Max Jones or Letary going to fill that role this year and be a hit? I mean, they brought in Tyler Johnson for a professional tryout too. So they're kind of throwing stuff at the wall. I feel like they had some pretty nice hits with Heinen. Grizzly was decent. So yeah, I mean, the pieces that go out hurt, and I think Olmark's the biggest one of all. I know I kind of left him for last, but 3 straight years he played 40 games for them. So now it's Swayman with the training wheels off. He's been great. He has been awesome. But can he play 60 games? It's a big difference. I don't see Korpisalo playing 40 games for them like Olmark was. They were pretty much an even split. And yeah, once the playoffs came around and Swayman showed how good he was, Montgomery was hesitant to go back to Olmark. And I get it. So the writing, like you said, the writing was on the wall. But I kind of have a little bit of worry with this team in general. And that's kind of where I'm starting with it, between the center depth and the goaltending now. Can Swayman handle that full, real heavy starter workload? We see goalies all the time. They can't handle it. They break down. They start just, towards the end of the season. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I think that is going to be, like you said, kind of the spark plug for this team. If Swayman can handle it, the Bruins have done a great job of kind of building up an organization that has a culture of winning, and they kind of all buy into the system. But if Swayman really starts to fall and Korpisalo is not kind of that grade A, grade B backup that they thought he was, this team could be in trouble. But again, we said that last year and we ate our words. We ate our words. We talked about the center depth again. And it is interesting too, because those bottom 6 on paper don't look fantastic.
Yeah, it's ugly.
It is, but this is one of the best blue lines in the league still.
Of course, yeah.
If anything, it's upgraded from last season. I think that Elias Lindholm pickup from 2 years ago has just been phenomenal for this team. I think he's one of the most underrated and underappreciated players in the league. Unfortunately, he's not really a piece you can bet on. I'd love to see maybe him get a little bit more love on the shots prop side of things. You occasionally can get his points and assists, but I just think that the step down last season was so much greater than it is this season. Because the Van Dreamstike, DeBrusque is going to hurt a little bit. But the Pat Maroon, Shattenkirk, I mean, those were exactly what they did this year again, where they just threw stuff at the wall. They signed anybody they could in free agency, and some of it worked. And I think some of the big pieces that really worked, Geeky and Zaka, are obviously still here and kind of growing with the team, shockingly. So I don't know. They proved to me last year that they have some magical pieces, especially with Marchand, and Pasternak became in my mind, the way he was able to carry the offense and still be an engine for a team that lacked any top six center puts him in just elite territory, even though he was pretty much there already. But now in my mind, it's so beyond that. I mean, he's a player who can completely turn a team's offense around. And blue line stays pretty much the same. I think you're kind of right though. It's going to live or die on Swayman's consistency across the full season and how much Korpisalo can pick up those extra games when needed.
Yeah, Boston's injury issues, while they've kind of been sporadic, haven't really, it's not been kind of their key guy that's gone down in the past year or so. And in addition to Swayman, I think it is Pastrnak. Can he sustain that production? Obviously, now Lindholm comes in and he's got a new center that he's got to gel with here, but he has played with Zacha in the past too. And Zacha last year started to become kind of a guy that you would look for in terms of shots on goal props, point props. Like he was a viable option on that top line. So now can Pastrnak again put up another 110, 115 points? Yes.
I don't see any reason why not. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't show anything different. Him and Marchand both played 82 games last year, despite kind of getting on the older side of things, which is incredible. Even that bottom six, too. So you look at it, Patois, he played last year, at least kind of 20 games-ish. Brezzo played around 20 games. Frederick, same thing. Beecher. So while they are kind of, let's say, new kids, they've also kind of played, they've already kind of gotten their introduction to the NHL, at least by 20 games, and then continuing into the postseason. So if that's kind of your thing of we don't know how they're going to do, they played pretty well last year for kind of their introduction to the team and trying to kind of gel with the Bruins going through this roster phase of the old guard to the new guard. And while you still kind of have your two generals and Marchand and Pastrnak, it's a lot of new corps here that have kind of bought in again to this system of Bruins hockey, and Montgomery coming in and kind of continuing that cycle. Listen, it's a franchise that I think most NHL fans would love to be a part of just because of the consistency and kind of what they build here. And every year it's kind of the same thing, despite maybe not winning as many Stanley Cups as they should have during the say last 10 to 15 year stretch. They've been damn good.
Yeah.
You know, you can only do so much here. When we look ahead to, I guess, another thing we can talk about this lineup, McAvoy obviously has kind of got an increased role in his leadership here, but as he progresses, do you see him as being like a bona fide top 5, top 10 defenseman, top 15? Where do you think he kind of ends up as, let's say at the end of this year, because he's been there for a few years, he's got his feet under him. Where do you think he kind of ends up this season in terms of offensive production? Because that's what he was known for when the Bruins brought him in, coming from BU.
Yeah, that's, he's not ever going to be one of those guys who's putting up
like a Makar Fox,
like that.
Yeah. But you remember when he came into the league, he was that guy of kind of that playmaking defenseman that could get them out of the zone and kind of push the puck up the ice.
But
he's kind of transitioned his game now to more defensively,
more of a two-way.
But his rookie year when he was with Chara, he was able to do that. And I think because of his partners haven't been kind of those stay-at-home defensive defensemen, he's had to transition his game here. So I'm interested to see now that he's paired up with Zadorov, if he does kind of go back to that play style where he can play more freely and get involved in the rush more.
But I mean, it may be more of a scheme of to keep pucks away from the net and protect your goalie and play Boston hockey, which is not necessarily run and gun, but the power play do the work, and otherwise you just kind of make your opponent play the way you want them to play. So his top productive season was the 21-22 season with 56 points and 10 goals. He's never had more than 12 goals in a season, and obviously never more than 56 points, and has only had 50 or more points in 2 seasons. Yeah, I would expect it to be pretty similar this year. And
Yeah.
again, he's probably kind of like Lindholm, where he's a little underappreciated across the entire NHL as a market, just because he's not as flashy of a player. But yeah, it's interesting. I do wonder if he'll get a little bit of a longer leash and take riskier pinches and just adjust his playing style to help push the offense a little bit more. But I don't know. It seems like that unit is designed to make it very tough to play against, and being out of position is something they try to avoid.
And again, we kind of talked about it. If Pastrnak and Marchand and kind of those top 6 forwards, the offense is a little bit stagnant. To get going in the beginning of the year, you wonder if he kind of takes it upon himself to kind of start to help out as much as he can there. So, Franco, any rookies you're looking at for the Boston Bruins here as we kind of round out this roster preview?
Well, so to me, it feels like they have a wing spot that needs to be filled, right? Right now, the way Daily Faceoff has them listed, they don't have any of the rookies making the roster. Fabian Lysell was a guy that was a first-round pick a few years back now. I was doing a little research on him. Some are, listing him as a bust and all that fun stuff. But
reasonable takes, yeah.
But I mean, think about it, right? Like, until this year, really, they've had such good depth overall, especially on the wing, with DeBrusk being there, JVR, the veteran, being there. Now those 2 pieces are gone, and now there is an opening here. So we'll see what happens in camp. But him and Georgi Merkulov, sorry, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but I actually saw things saying he might get a chance to make the team out of camp as well. So I just think there's a spot, there's an opportunity. So now it's time, guys. Like, it's
weaker competition than they've had in the bottom 6 than years past, and the Bruins have been pretty fluid with their roster.
I mean, honestly, I think that right wing, or that wing on the Marchand line, is open to me. I think, as much as I like Geeky, I think he slots in better on that third line with them. You need an offensive young kid to fill that line. You have Marchand and Coyle on that second line, 2 very defensively responsible players. Give a kid a shot. Yeah. I mean, I would be a lot more excited seeing this team bumping Geeky down, and honestly bumping Coyle down and moving Matty up from the third line up as the center for that second line.
Yeah.
And just kind of like let Marchand run with the kids and see what happens. And that might even bring a spark to his game too. Cause I mean, let's be honest here. Like, we know who he is and what he wants to do. He's a pain to play against. He's just that type of guy, that type of leader. And I could see him thriving with a responsibility like that, having 2 kids on his line. So I think seeing that on paper, I'd be a lot more excited than what I'm seeing right now, the way it looks like. But yeah, we'll see. I hope they give these kids a shot and see what they got.
I mean, they're going to have to rely on them too, because the Bruins are going to be Swayman's due a lot of money next year as well. So the Bruins changes of the roster is probably be pretty minimal. So now's your chance, I guess, if you're looking to kind of solidify your spot on this roster. Before we get into best worst case scenario, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, BetterHelp. This episode of Expected Bets 4 is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever stopped to think about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, we don't always make the time to learn we used to when we were kids. Kids are constantly exploring and growing, but somewhere along the way, life gets busy and we lose some of that curiosity. What's something you've been wanting to dive into? Maybe it's cooking, picking up a new language, or even figure out your golf game to finally beat your new friend. Just because we're older doesn't mean we have to stop growing. In fact, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder. It reminds you that your back-to-school moment can happen at any time. Therapy is not just for people who have gone through something major. It's for anyone looking to be the best version of themselves. Therapy can help you learn positive ways to cope with stress, set healthy boundaries, and tackle challenges with more confidence. It's really about giving yourself the tools to thrive and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Now back to the show. Now, as we get into the best and worst case scenario for the Boston Bruins this year, Betsky, I'll start with you. Best case scenario for the Bruins.
I think best case scenario, you're looking at a team who regains the top of the Atlantic, has a nice, smooth first round of the playoffs potentially, and you have Swayman knocking at the door for the Vezina. I think that regular points that set at 99.5 scares me a little bit. Best case scenario would be flipping that and seeing something similar that we did 2 years ago, or even last season, or even just excuse me, 2 years ago they set an NHL record. That ain't happening again.
No.
And so I think best case scenario is replicating what we saw in them last year in the standings and their win total, but maybe eclipsing Florida and actually taking the division.
What do you think? This is obviously kind of a loaded question here, but in terms of, say, the Bruins, I don't think they're full Stanley Cup contenders this year unless of this bottom six kind of continues to grow and all their young prospects kind of take that next step. So would you rather have, do you think if you're a Bruins fan, would you rather not make the playoffs, but have your young core or kind of young guys, that bottom six, really develop this year and kind of play pretty well? That's kind of really encouraging for the next 5 to 6 years, or make the second round of the playoffs and still kind of have depth questions like you've had for the past 5 years, and now have to sign Swayman and really can't bring in any new big time free agents to help this roster out, and Marchand and Poster get a year older.
Yeah, I mean, I think hoping that those kids can make an impact is the best thing you can hope for, and even if that means taking a step back and potentially not making the playoffs. So, looking at some of these odds on the right here too, I almost think you could take the over for the season points, because if they're getting over 100, obviously they're making the playoffs, but if you want to hedge that with missing the playoffs, you're kind of in this position where you're going to at least make your bet back. But if they miss the playoffs, you're doubling your money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like almost like a risk-free way of doubling your money.
Yeah, we can get into that in a second. But Franco, worst case scenario for the Bruins here as we look at this 2024-25 season.
Yeah, I think the worst case is you see that step back from Swayman, so to speak, not being able to take on that full-time role, and just like you kind of mentioned, no development from these young guys. I think you're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of Lindholm being what he was 2 years ago for Calgary. He played on a line with two very, very good players. Now he's getting to play with Pastrnak. I think that can only help him. I mean, if he can return, he was a point per game player in Calgary that year. So is he that guy, or is he the guy we've seen the last 2 years where he's kind of slowed down a little bit? I don't know. And maybe he is that Bergeron role, but I think if he's not where the guy that they brought in, they're going to be playing a lot of low, slow scoring games and trying to eke out wins. But I just don't see the scoring depth, and that's where I'm kind of worried as well. You know, like if Swayman cannot keep them tight 1-goal games and he starts breaking down towards the end of the year, that's the worst case I see for them.
Yeah, if Swayman has an off year this year, like his worst year of his career, and then goes into the off season, do a big paycheck. Yeah, I think that's the worst case scenario for the Bruins, because they've already gotten rid of Allmark, despite him kind of being older and not kind of their option in the future. But if Swayman, their guy for the next hopefully 5 to 10 years, as most Bruins fans like, if he's not the guy, that opens a whole new can of worms for this team.
Well, I think you have to resign him too. Like
I think you do too. Yeah, no, I think he's locked in.
Regardless of what he does this year, you're signing him regardless.
I would agree. Yeah, no, I think Swayman kind of has them locked away, and he's got the key pretty much. And whatever he's going to ask for, they're pretty much going to have to give him, because We've seen this goaltender market the past few seasons, even in free agency. It's not exactly great. You're not getting those big time goaltenders really testing free agency. These teams are locking them down as soon as they can. So yeah, that would be interesting. I think if we reevaluate that topic halfway through the season, it could be a long winter in Boston. Before we get into the season points total, playoff odds, and a few other topics of discussion, I'd like to talk to you about DraftKings. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. The NFL season kicks off on Thursday night with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs are currently favored by 3, with the total being set at 46.5. If you're looking to place your bet on Week 1 NFL action, head over to DraftKings. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you just bet $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Only at DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
All right, so the Bruins regular season points total is set at 99.5. They had 109 last year. And the year before that, they won the President's Trophy with 26 points. In addition to the 109, that's quick math, and that's not my forte right there. So that's where I'm going to pretty much leave that topic. But again, that 26-point jump or decline, let's say, most teams, that'd be disastrous.
Yeah.
Missing the playoffs, kind of local sports radios, those hotlines are lit up, but not really in Boston. They kind of managed to survive that transition period and still make the second round of the playoffs. So Betsky, I'll start with you. 99.5 here. Obviously a pretty large total. You think it's fair, kind of overpriced, underpriced? What are your thoughts initially just looking at this?
I think it's fair. So I believe last season, and I mean, it's going to be impossible for me to dig this up, but I think last season it was like 105. Or it may have been even like 110, and I was hammering the under there. I've learned my lesson here, though. I think as long as there's no significant injuries, I think this is a line that they should be able to surpass. I mean, again, biggest players they lost were DeBrusk and Allmark. Allmark is part of a tandem, which Korpisalo could potentially fill that kind of role as a tandem goalie.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And DeBrusk was a pretty decent two-way winger who never really became like a point per game type guy.
Yeah.
And you beef up the center depth. So I think kind of like we were talking about with best and worst case scenarios, I think going right in the middle of them being able to do something very similar to last season, maybe a slight step down, is very realistic. So I definitely like this over for the season points. I'm not going to be fooled twice by the Boston Bruins. They clearly have some magic there, and they know how to outwork opponents. They know how to outcoach opponents, and they get great goaltending and a great blue line. So yeah, give me that over there. But as I mentioned before, I love kind of combining that with the miss the playoffs, and now you pretty much have a free shot at doubling your money.
Yeah, when we kind of talk about other teams, the Bruins' worst case and best case scenario seems to have a larger margin than most teams when you're really kind of considering all the options here. I think it's because they're a better team, obviously, that more things can go wrong, of course, and the expectations are higher. But there's a pretty large gap between best and worst case scenario for this team. So it should be interesting. I don't hate that at all. Also, I looked up their regular season points total last year. It was set at 100.5. So
Wow.
only a
Okay.
point reduction that the books have kind of factored in from last year.
And so that's really interesting because the books are kind of showing their cards where they thought that the departure of Krejci and Bergeron was going to have a much larger impact than it did. And they're showing their cards that they think Allmark leaving isn't as big of an issue as, maybe some people may think. So I think that shows that they have confidence that they brought in a capable second goaltender, and that all that long laundry list of people who left the team was truly indeed just throwing shit at a wall and seeing what will stick. And they are just kind of recycling that strategy for the offseason.
Yeah, completely. Franco, what are your thoughts kind of on those two markets in terms of points and playoffs?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of echo Betsky here. It's just, we looked at them last year. I think even the year prior, I think we were a little higher on them when they won the President's Trophy.
Yeah,
we weren't completely out on them, but last year after losing those pieces, we thought, yeah, they look like they could be a team maybe on the decline. And you look at that center depth and just the overall depth in general looked a lot weaker. I think bringing in Lindholm and Zadorov is pretty damn good. Two really good pieces, really. And that blue line looks really nice. So I think regardless, even if they are slightly worse than they were last year, I think 100 points is pretty achievable. I looked, and 10 teams out of the 32 were over 100 points last year, and there were a few that landed on 99 exactly. So it could be kind of sweaty, kind of tight if you do end up just taking that. But I don't mind Betsky's idea of just kind of free rolling that and taking the points over. So that doesn't look too bad. I think we're going to know pretty early in the season what this team is really going to be, if these young guys take a step, if the new pieces fit, and we could really kind of get a better idea of how we feel about this team.
Was it last year that McAvoy and Marchand were out to start the season, or was
Yep.
that 2? So that was last year, and their point total was still set 100.5. That's interesting. And then because both of them made miraculous recoveries and kind of came back a month, if not 2 months sooner than they were slated to as well.
Yeah.
So, all right. In terms of the division, conference, and Stanley Cup odds, they're 5-1 to win the division, 9-1 to win the Eastern Conference, and 18-1 to win the Stanley Cup. Is anyone biting on any of those markets? The division seems pretty interesting to me. I'll start there. We've kind of looked ahead in terms of the Florida Panthers are the current favorite in the Atlantic, followed by the Maple Leafs, and then you have the Bruins and Lightning sitting around that 5-1 range. The best case scenario for this team, they can certainly compete to win this Atlantic division. We've seen teams regress following the Stanley Cup. Obviously, some turnover in Florida and Toronto as well. I don't hate this team by any means to kind of have everything click their way. We've seen those bottom six forwards. They played well last year. They take another step this year. That defense really starts to click and stays healthy. Their PK is much better than last. The power play is going to be interesting. Is Pastrnak still kind of going to be that one guy that continues to deliver scoring opportunities for them, or are they going to kind of have to look at rotating someone else into that top power play unit to kind of put another threat out there as well? So that is going to be interesting. Obviously, Korpisalo, if he can play 20 games, I think they certainly stand a chance to win this division by all means, because clearly that means he's playing well. So I would bite on the 5-1. I don't think they win the Eastern Conference. Like we said, I think second round playoffs is going to be their kind of peak of where they go here. Maybe the Eastern Conference Finals, if everything truly is kind of set up ideally for them. But I'm not touching them to win the Stanley Cup, probably not touching them to win the conference. Any thoughts from you, Betsky, on kind of those three markets?
Yeah, I'm not going to touch the Stanley Cup or conference at all here, but that division is slightly interesting at 5-1. I don't mind that because I think Florida may have took the biggest hit out of the teams in this division as far as players they lost, and obviously the cap is going to make it hard to keep Stanley Cup winning teams together. And obviously they are going to need to find some magic again as well to potentially make up for some of that lost ground. I honestly think Toronto may be kind of the scariest to put up a big regular season with some coaching changes and maybe an extra spark there. So really, you're getting 5-1 odds in a division where I really think there's only 3 teams who potentially win it, and I don't think it's going to be a battle with Tampa. Unfortunately, Buffalo, I don't think is quite there yet. Detroit, I don't think it's going to be the division winner.
Ottawa,
And then Ottawa,
Montreal,
same
all out.
situation. Yeah.
So
So
you're essentially
really,
getting the highest priced contender at 5-1, and then just looking for hedging opportunities throughout the year. Because it's going to be either Florida or Toronto that kind of, let's say, contends with Boston for that division. And if you can grab Boston at 5-1 now, that opens the door to even maybe spreading on Florida and Toronto kind of as the season progresses.
Yep.
So, all right, let's get into some player point props here. There's 4 players currently listed on DraftKings right now. Pasternak for season total at 108.5. Marchand listed at 68.5. Lindholm at 68.5, and Charlie Coyle at 47.5. So there's 4 options on DraftKings right now to look at regular season player point props. Franco, I'll start with you here. Out of those 4 guys, who are you kind of most looking at?
Lindholm feels like the easy one here. 68.5. If he stays healthy, plays 82 games, on line with Pasta, probably top power play unit as well. You got to figure 68 points. If we're looking at Pasta's point number being at 108, right? I mean, what did Zaka have? I would like to see what Zaka had, actually, to be honest. I don't have that up in front of me, but I feel like if he can get to that point where he was a couple of years ago, again, I kind of, not to be repetitive, but he played online with 2 very talented players. Now you're playing with Pasta, who can score 50 goals. It's that opens up the door for a lot of point opportunities for a guy that can pass the puck, and he's going to be on the ice a lot with him. So I think that's a good number for him. It's less than a point per game, and he has been a point per game player historically. In the past, he's been able to achieve that. So I like that.
Yeah, I think out of those 4, I think that's certainly a contender. And Zaka had 58 points last year?
59.
59 points last year.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Marchand's interesting too, because he had 60. He had 67 last year, and this season he's slated at 68.5 here. I think that would be the one where I kind of look for some regression here, just based on the line shakeups, especially as we talked about before. We don't really feel like Geeky's going to kind of settle in on that second line. Coyle, while he's a much better second line center, than up on that top line where they had him for kind of portions of this season. So I think he slots in better there for sure. And again, like Franco said too, Pertois may come up and be that second line center when the season closes out. So I think if anything, I would look at Marchand to kind of have a little bit regression this year as he kind of starts to get older again. And he played all 82 games last season. So
oddly enough, too, Marchand has hit 67 twice in a row, 2 seasons in a row. Huh. So that's interesting. They're putting it right there. Just very tempting.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of player goals, Pasternak is set at 49.5. Brad Marchand at 26.5, and Charlie Coyle at 18.5 here. Any of those props are enticing for you guys, or are those kind of just stayaways?
I don't
Feels a little
really
too
love any. Yeah.
Yeah. Charlie Coyle had 25 goals last year. If you were to, I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have said it was certainly below 20, but that's interesting that I thought as well.
Yeah, I mean, if he stays top two lines, I could maybe see that. I just don't want to be
I'm not
betting anything like
betting on Charlie Coyle to score more than 18 and a half goals this season.
No.
I'm just going to kind of put that out there right now. That's not going to be on any sort of bet slip that I post this season.
And 50 goals for Pastrnak is like your best case scenario almost for him.
Yeah.
You're buying at the high. He can do it. He sure as hell can
And
do it.
he is the main catalyst for that offense. If they're going to, like you said, reach that best case scenario option, he's going to have to put up 50.
Yep.
So
yeah, give me the division winner at plus 500, because if those guys are hitting those goal lines,
That's a lot better
winning the
than a
division.
better number.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, obviously the Bruins are certainly a contender, like we said, to win this Atlantic division, but it's more of a hedging opportunity down the line where you're hoping it's a 2-horse race between them and, let's say, Tampa Bay or Toronto. So that was kind of the thought process behind that. All right, next up is the award section here. So we have the Rocket Richard. Pastrnak is 5-1 to win that. Is anyone going to bite?
I'm not. No.
Say he's won it once before. The most recent time he won it was been 2020 when he tied Ovechkin with 48 goals. They have him slated at 49.5 this year, so clearly the production's going to go up a little bit. But yeah, I'm staying away from that one too. I think there's too many variables that we haven't seen this line click, or this chemistry is just kind of going to be unknown for the first 10 games, it feels like. And so I'm going to stay away from that one, and it sounds like you guys are too. The Art Ross Pasta at 12-1 for the most points. It's been McDavid, Kucherov, and Draisaitl. Those have been the 3 winners in the past 5 seasons here. Hard to bet against McDavid, and I don't think if I'm picking another option, Pasternak's going to be that guy. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, no.
No, I just think in general this team is a team that's going to be a lower scoring team in general. I don't want pieces of points and goals and stuff like that.
Yeah. In terms of the Hart Trophy, Pasternak's listed at 20-1 and Brad Marchand at 500-1. Any of those options intrigue you guys here?
No.
Yep. Kind of the same thought process there. The Norris. McAvoy's at 20-1 and Lindholm's at 300-1.
If they were to ever split the Norris into 2 trophies and have defensive defensemen and offensive defensemen, then maybe I'd be writing a McAvoy prop. But it's just not there yet, and there's no way. There's a lot more tempting options out there.
Of course, yeah.
You would have to see a significant offensive boost from McAvoy, and I mean, there is a world where maybe that does happen with Zadorov coming in, but I don't see him touching guys like Makar and Yossi and all this. Fun other names for
Fox
offensive
Hughes,
points.
yeah,
I mean, it's just insane. Like
Yep. All right, another interesting category here for the Bruins, the Vezina Trophy. Jeremy Swayman is the current favorite at 6-1. I think if you're looking at any kind of awards to bet for this Boston team, he's your guy to do it. But again, this increased workload could result in a dip in production. What are your thoughts? Are you going to buy the hype on Swayman here for Vezina this year?
This isn't one I would want to do preseason. This is one I would keep my eye on as you get into the season, and maybe you even get better odds by November, and then he has a crazy run later. Goalies, there's a lot that factors, obviously, their save percentage, goals against averages, everything like that. But also the win column is very important for this award. And that's where I would get a little bit more scared, especially as we as we mentioned earlier in the show, if he does not have the ability to take the reins here, it's not going to look great.
Yeah. I would agree.
I would rather get a bona fide guy like Bobrovsky or Hellebuck early into the betting season, and maybe hope to get a little bit better odds here later. But that's my opinion.
I mean, especially with the price on him. You're getting plus
Yeah.
600. I mean, it doesn't feel right with what the other options are and this new shift. I mean, I think if anything, he's going to have more wins. He's obviously have more wins than he ever has in his career, but just because he's going to play more games. But I think there's more that can go wrong, and there's guys in better positions. Although I do like this blue line in front of him. I think this team is built to play lower scoring games, so we could see some good numbers from him as far as save percentage and goals against and all that fun stuff. But yeah, 6-1. It's like you're getting no value.
Yeah.
You're getting them at the top.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Any closing thoughts on the Bruins here?
Interesting team again. It's going to be one of those situations where are they going to be able to keep the ship going, or is this one it's finally leaky enough where it starts to sink?
Yeah, kind of like we mentioned before, the best case and the worst case, that margin exponential there. Franco, any closing thoughts from you here?
I just keep thinking they can't keep getting away with this. That's when I was breaking down his team, that was the thought that just kept going through my head. It's like, how do they keep continuing to be a top team in the league despite all the losses and the changes and all that stuff? Is this finally the year where we see that little bit of a drop off? Maybe Pasternak's a hell of a player, Marchand's a hell of a player, and we'll see. We'll see if they can still work that magic.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate everyone for tuning in on this episode of Expected Bets 4. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at Expected Bets 4. Same tag on Instagram and YouTube as well. So be sure to check out that. We have a ton of content coming out this season. Again, we want to thank the Hockey Podcast Network for powering this podcast as well. We appreciate everyone for listening, and be sure to subscribe.